Hey everyone, get ready, because we're about to tackle a big one today. Something that might just rock your Christmas world.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're diving deep into the question, was Jesus really born on December 25th? We're going beyond the usual Christmas story and exploring a fascinating argument made by a biblical scholar in a YouTube video.
Interesting. What's their take?
Well, get this. They say there are clues hidden all over the Bible, not just in the Christmas story, that point to a different birth date.
Wow, hidden clues. That's intriguing.
It is. And they connect Jesus' birth to a specific Jewish festival. Talk about thinking outside the manger, right?
I'm all ears. Let's hear it.
Okay, so buckle up. First off, this scholar argues that December 25th was chosen by early Christians to line up with pagan holidays that were already happening, not because it was accurate to the Bible.
That makes you think.
Right. And they even list SX ancient pagan celebrations that occurred around December 25th.
Wow, 6. Like what?
Like the Osiris festival in Egypt, all about the rebirth of the god Osiris.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. Lots of gift giving and decorating with greenery, right?
Exactly. Sound familiar?
It does. Makes you wonder.
I know. It makes you wonder how much of that got mixed into how we celebrate Christmas today. And then there's Saturnalia in Rome.
Ah, Saturnalia, the week-long party.
That's the one. Feasts, parties, just going wild. Starting to sound a lot like our December, right?
Definitely rings a bell. But what does the scholar say about all this? Seems a little, I don't know.
Well, they point out some pretty strong warnings in the Bible against mixing God stuff with pagan traditions, specifically Jeremiah 7.31 and Jeremiah 10.1 to 5.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those verses are pretty direct. So if not December 25th, then when does this scholar think Jesus was? I don't know.
Well, where things get really interesting. They claim Jesus was born in the fall, around the time of the Feast of Tabernacles.
Whoa, the Feast of Tabernacles. That's a bold claim.
I know, right? But they've got some compelling reasons for thinking this. It all comes down to these clues: late summer, early fall.
All right, I'm ready. Hit me with those clues.
Okay, clue number 1. The census mentioned in Luke 2.1 to 3, the one that brought Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem.
Right, the reason they were traveling in the first place.
Exactly. Now, the scholar argues that it wouldn't have made logistical sense for a census to happen during Passover or Pentecost.
Why not? Those were big Jewish festivals, weren't they?
They were huge. Everyone was already traveling to Jerusalem. Can you imagine adding a census on top of that?
Yeah, talk about gridlock.
Total chaos. So the scholar suggests the census was more likely timed around the Feast of Tabernacles, which is in the late summer, early fall.
Ah, okay, I see. Better weather, harvest is done, people are more free.
Makes sense, right? So that's clue 1, pointing to the fall. But wait, there's more.
Bring on clue number 2.
Clue number 2 focuses on the manger where Jesus was laid. Now, the word that's usually translated as manger can also refer to the temporary shelters, the sukkot, used during the Feast of Tabernacles.
Wait, are you saying Jesus might have been laid in a sukkah?
That's exactly what the scholar is suggesting. It's like a subtle hint embedded in the language of the Christmas story.
Whoa, that's fascinating. But how does that tie to his birth date?
Well, for the scholar, it adds more weight to the idea that Jesus' birth happened during the Feast of Tabernacles.
Okay, I see. Like an extra layer of meaning.
Exactly. So we've got the census, the manger, both pointing to the fall. But there's still more to this puzzle.
This is getting good. I'm hooked. What's the next clue?
All right, clue number 3 takes us to the shepherds watching their flocks in the fields the night Jesus was born. And this is where things get really interesting.
Shepherds, fields.
Yeah.
How does that connect to the fall?
It's all about this ancient shepherding practice called agroleo.
Agroleo, huh? Never heard of it.
It basically involved grazing sheep on the leftover crops after the harvest was done. And guess when that happened?
May guess. Late summer, early fall.
You got it. So if those shepherds were practicing agroleo, it makes a lot more sense for Jesus to be born in the fall, not December, when it would be way too cold for the sheep to be out there.
That makes total sense. It's amazing how these little details can shift our whole perspective.
Right. I never thought ancient farming practices could be linked to the birth of Jesus, but it gets even more interesting.
Oh, there's more. Don't leave me hanging.
Clue number 4 builds on this idea of post-harvest grazing and connects to the biblical concept of gleaning. Remember that.
Vaguely. Remind me.
It's in Leviticus 23. Farmers were supposed to leave leftover crops in their fields for the poor to collect.
Right, gleaning. It's coming back to me now. But how does that fit into this whole birth date mystery?
Well, the scholar points out that after the gleaning period, shepherds would often bring their flocks to graze on whatever was left. And again, this practice perfectly lines up with the Feast of Tabernacles time frame.
Wow, it's like all these pieces are fitting together.
It is. We've got the census, the manger, the shepherds, gleaning, all pointing to the fall. Are you convinced yet?
I'm definitely intrigued, I'll say that. But what about the Feast of Tabernacles itself? Why is that so significant?
That's clue number 5, and it might be the most compelling yet. The Feast of Tabernacles commemorates God dwelling temporarily among his people.
And wasn't Jesus called Emmanuel, which means God with us?
Exactly. And just like those temporary dwellings, the Sukkot, used during the Feast of Tabernacles, Jesus was only here on earth for a limited time.
Wow, I never thought of it like that.
It's pretty powerful, right? The timing of Jesus' birth lining up with a festival that celebrates God dwelling among his people.
It almost feels poetic.
It does. Okay, so that's 5 clues, all pointing to the fall. But remember, the scholar mentioned a 6th clue.
Oh yeah, the one they're keeping under wraps. What was it again?
They claim it's a biblical passage that actually states the birth date of Jesus, like explicitly.
Whoa, seriously? And they're not going to tell us?
Nope. Guess we gotta wait for the book to come out. But in the meantime, I'm curious, what do you think about all this?
Well, I'm definitely fascinated. It makes you rethink things,
Yeah.
But there's still a lot to unpack here. We got to remember, this is just one scholar's interpretation. There are other viewpoints out there.
That's true. And there's another clue we need to explore involving John the Baptist. Plus, I want to talk about that whole abomination of desolation thing the scholar brought up. Sounds intense, right?
Yeah, a little ominous. I'm definitely curious to hear more.
We'll dive into all that in part 2 of our deep dive, so stay tuned.
All right, so we left off with that cliffhanger about John the Baptist. Where does HE fit into this whole birth date puzzle?
That's right. We've got this bonus clue to unpack, and it involves some serious timeline detective work.
Okay, I love a good mystery. Lay it on me.
Well, it all starts with this seemingly insignificant detail, the course of Abijah, mentioned in Luke 1.5.
The course of Abijah. Refresh my memory. What's that all about?
No worries, it's kind of a deep cut. Basically, it refers to a specific group of priests serving in the temple during a certain week. And thanks to historical records, we actually know this particular course happened sometime in late June.
Okay, and what's the connection to John the Baptist?
Well, remember, John the Baptist's father, Zechariah, was a priest.
Right.
And guess what? He was serving during the course of Abijah when the angel Gabriel appeared to him, announcing John's birth.
Oh, wow, yeah. I remember that part. So they knew pretty specifically when John was conceived then.
Exactly. And if you remember from Luke 1.36, Mary conceived Jesus 6 months after Elizabeth, John's mother, conceived John.
So hang on. If John's conception was probably in late June,
Add 6 months to that.
we're talking late December for Jesus' conception.
And then factor in the usual 9 months of pregnancy.
That puts Jesus' birth in late September or early October, right around the Feast of Tabernacles.
Boom! It's like a chain reaction of biblical clues all pointing back to the fall. It's amazing how this scholar pieces together these seemingly minor details to build a pretty convincing case.
I know, it really shows how the Bible is so interconnected. And it reminds us to look beyond just the surface level, to dig deeper into the historical and cultural context.
What's really hitting home for me is how this scholar is encouraging us to see the Bible not just as a bunch of separate stories, but as one unified narrative where even the smallest details matter.
I totally agree. And when we approach the Bible like that, it opens up a whole new level of understanding.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Pagan holidays, ancient shepherds, this whole John the Baptist timeline. But honestly, I'm still wrestling with the implications of all this. If Jesus really was born in the fall, does that mean we've been celebrating Christmas on the wrong date for centuries?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And one that scholars have been debating for ages. But I think the bigger question is, does the date really matter? What matters is the meaning behind it all. The incarnation of God, the coming of the Messiah, the light entering the world.
You're right, it's about the message, not the date on the calendar. But I can't help but wonder, if early Christians intentionally lined up Jesus' birth with pagan holidays, does that take away from the meaning of Christmas in any way?
That's a tough one, and honestly, there's no easy answer. But we got to remember, the early Christians were living in a totally different world. They were trying to spread the message of Christianity in a culture that was dominated by pagan beliefs.
So maybe they saw this aligning of dates as a way to make Christianity more, I don't know, relatable.
Exactly. It could have been a way to bridge the gap between their faith and the culture surrounding them.
That makes sense. It's interesting how historical context can shape religious traditions like that.
It really does. And it's a good reminder that we should always be open to re-examining our beliefs and traditions as we learn more and gain new insights.
Absolutely. And speaking of learning more, what about that sixth and final clue? The scholar mentioned a biblical passage that straight up states the birth date of Jesus. Are we going to get to that before this deep dive is over?
Well, he's saving that big reveal for his book.
Yeah,
But even without that last piece of the puzzle, we've got plenty to chew on.
we do. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to that abomination of desolation concept. The scholar brought that up, and honestly, it kind of freaked me out. What exactly did he mean by that, and what's the connection to Christmas?
Good catch. That's definitely worth exploring. To understand that, we got to dive a bit deeper into biblical prophecy. The term abomination of desolation comes from the book of Daniel, and it refers to a future event where the temple in Jerusalem will be desecrated by some kind of false idol or act of sacrilege. It's often seen as a sign of the end times.
Okay, so some serious end time stuff, but how does that connect to Christmas, to what the scholar was saying?
Well, his concern is that by connecting Jesus' birth with these pagan holidays, the early Christians might have accidentally brought elements of pagan worship into their faith. He's suggesting that this mixing of traditions, even if it was well-intentioned, could be seen as a kind of desolation, like a spiritual corruption.
So he's not literally saying that Christmas is the abomination of desolation from the book of Daniel.
No, not literally. He's using that concept to illustrate the potential danger of compromising one's faith to fit in with culture. It's a reminder to always check our beliefs and make sure they line up with the Bible.
That's a powerful reminder that our faith shouldn't be shaped by trends or what's popular, but by the truth of God's word. So even though we don't have that final clue yet, what would you say is the biggest takeaway from this whole deep dive?
I think it's the reminder that our understanding of faith and tradition should always be open to growth and change. We shouldn't be afraid to ask questions, to challenge what we think we know, and to dig deeper into the Bible and its historical context.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's been an incredible journey exploring these different perspectives and seeing how they challenge what we think we know about Christmas. So for all of you listening, what's resonating with you? Has this deep dive changed your view of Christmas at all?
And if you're feeling curious, I encourage you to do your own research, explore these ideas further, and come to your own conclusions. Remember, knowledge is most powerful when we understand it and apply it to our lives.
Absolutely. And that's what makes these deep dives so exciting. They always leave me with more questions than answers, but that's a good thing. It keeps me curious, keeps me thinking, and keeps me coming back for more. Until next time, keep diving deep, everyone.